They called him the luckiest man in England, a duke with a fortune that rivaled the crown, about to marry the most beautiful woman of the season. But luck is a funny thing. Sometimes it looks like a blessing when it is actually a curse wrapped in silk. Sebastian thought he was surprising his beloved with a diamond necklace. Instead, he found himself frozen behind a heavy velvet curtain, holding his breath as the woman he worshipped spoke words that would shatter his soul. He went into that room, a man in love. He left it a monster seeking revenge. This is the story of how a broken heart built a prison for the guilty. The rain in London did not wash things clean. It merely made the grime slicker, turning the cobblestones of Mayfair into treacherous black mirrors. Sebastian Vance, the Duke of Blackwood, did not mind the rain. In fact, he preferred the tempest. It suited his temperament. Standing at 6'4", with broad shoulders that strained the seams of his bespoke coats and skin the color of deep mahogany, a legacy of his grandfather's union with a Jamaican heiress, Sebastian was a man who commanded attention even when he sought silence. He was a man used to being stared at. In the House of Lords, they stared with thinly veiled disdain. In the gentle parlours of society, they stared with curiosity. But in the eyes of Lady Genevieve Sterling, he had believed he saw something else. He thought he saw acceptance. He thought he saw love. "To the Sterling residence, Your Grace?" his coachman, Thomas, asked, peering through the trap-door of the carriage. "Yes, Thomas. And hurry. I intend to catch her before she leaves for the opera," Sebastian replied, his hand instinctively brushing the velvet box in his pocket. Inside rested the Blackwood sapphires, a necklace that hadn't seen the light of day since his mother passed. Giving them to Genevieve was more than a gesture. It was a surrender. It was his way of saying, "You are part of me now." The carriage rattled over the stones, splashing through puddles. Sebastian looked out the window, his reflection ghosting against the glass. He had spent 30 years building walls around his heart. His father had been a cold man, obsessed with propriety, always warning Sebastian that society would never truly accept a dark duke. Sebastian had fought tooth and nail to prove him wrong. He had tripled the estate's fortune, restored the crumbling abbey, and conducted himself with a rigid honor that made him unassailable. But it was lonely at the top of the mountain. Until Genevieve. She was light where he was shadow. Golden-haired, blue-eyed, with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She didn't care about the whispers. She held his arm in public. She smiled when he entered the room. She was the first person to make him feel that he was not just a title or a curiosity, but a man. The carriage rolled to a halt in front of the Sterling townhouse. The windows were glowing with warmth, a stark contrast to the dreary evening. "Wait here, Thomas," Sebastian said, stepping out into the drizzle. He waved away the footman at the door, a man he had tipped generously on many occasions. "Your Grace." The footman bowed low. "Lady Genevieve is in the drawing-room. Shall I announce you?" "No," Sebastian said, a rare, boyish smile touching his lips. "I wish to surprise her." He walked through the foyer, the familiar scent of lavender and beeswax greeting him. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock. He moved toward the drawing-room, his boots making no sound on the thick Persian rugs. The heavy oak doors were slightly ajar. He was about to push them open when he heard a voice, a man's voice. "Come now, Jenny, you can't possibly mean to go through with it." Sebastian froze. The voice was familiar. It belonged to Lord Rupert Calloway, a man Sebastian considered a casual acquaintance, a second son of an earl with a reputation for gambling debts and loose morals. Sebastian's hand hovered over the door handle. He should announce himself. He should walk in and demand to know why Calloway was addressing his future bride as Jenny. But an instinct, primal and sharp, seized his chest. It was the same instinct that had saved him during a hunting accident years ago. "Stop. Listen." He stepped softly to the side, slipping into the small alcove where the heavy velvet curtains of the hallway arch met the wall. From here, he was invisible, but through the crack in the door, the voices were crystal clear. "I have no choice, Rupert," Genevieve's voice floated out. It lacked the musical lilt Sebastian was used to. It sounded tired, sharp, and terrifyingly pragmatic. "There is always a choice," Rupert scoffed. "Run away with me. We can go to the continent." "And live on what?" Genevieve snapped. "Love and air. You have lost your last £1,000 at the whist tables, Rupert. My father is on the brink of bankruptcy. If I do not marry the Duke, we lose the house. We lose everything. I will be scrubbing floors within a month." Sebastian felt a coldness seep into his marrow that had nothing to do with the damp coat he wore. "She is marrying me for money." It was a painful realization, but not a fatal one. Many marriages in the peerage were transactions. He could live with that, perhaps, if there was some affection, some respect. Then came the laughter. It was high, cold, and cruel. "Besides," Genevieve said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried effortlessly to Sebastian's ears, "it won't be forever. Just until he produces an heir and has an accident, or until I have secured a grand enough allowance to live separately." Sebastian's breath hitched. The velvet box in his pocket suddenly felt as heavy as a tombstone. "But him?" Rupert pressed, sounding jealous. "Can you really stomach it? The man is intense. And let's be honest, Jenny, he doesn't exactly fit in at the tea tables. He's a brute." Sebastian closed his eyes, waiting for her defense, waiting for her to say that he was intelligent, kind, honorable. "He is a beast," Genevieve said, and the disgust in her voice was a physical blow. "You should see him, Rupert. He looks at me with those dark, desperate eyes like a lost puppy. It's pathetic. He actually thinks I love him. He thinks because he bought me flowers and listens to my poetry that we are soulmates." "Does he touch you?" "Barely," she scoffed. "He is so terrified of disrespecting me. It's nauseating. He treats me like glass because he thinks he's lucky to have me. He has no idea that every time he takes my hand, I have to suppress a shiver of revulsion. He is so dark, so looming. I feel like I'm being courted by a shadow." Sebastian's hand gripped the curtain so hard the fabric threatened to tear. The physical rejection hurt, but the mockery of his tenderness, the very thing he prided himself on, cut deeper than any blade. He had given her his gentleness, the rarest part of him, and she was serving it up as a joke to her lover. "So, the plan remains?" Rupert asked. "The plan remains," Genevieve confirmed. "I marry the savage. I secure the Blackwood fortune. I pay off your debts, Rupert. And then, well, the Duke is known to ride dangerous horses. Accidents happen in the country. You are wicked, my love." "I am a survivor," she replied. There was the sound of rustling silk, then silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of a kiss. Sebastian stood in the hallway, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The world tilted on its axis. 5 minutes ago, he had been a man with a future. Now, he was a mark, a victim, a savage to be used and discarded. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so pure and white-hot it threatened to consume the house. He could burst in there. He could challenge Rupert to a duel and throw Genevieve to the streets. It would be satisfying. It would be loud. But Sebastian Vance was not a man of loud, impulsive reactions. He was a strategist. He was a man who played chess while others played checkers. If they wanted a beast, he would show them a beast. But not the kind they expected. He turned silently, stepping back toward the foyer. He moved like a ghost, exiting the house before the footman could even return to his post. He climbed back into the carriage, his face a mask of stone. "Change of plans, Thomas?" the coachman asked, noting the dark look on his master's face. "Yes," Sebastian said, his voice dropping an octave, devoid of all warmth. "Take us back to Blackwood House. And Thomas, prepare the horses for a journey to the northern estate at dawn. We are leaving London." "Is everything all right, Your Grace?" "Everything is exactly as it should be," Sebastian lied, staring into the rain. "I have simply seen the truth, and the truth requires a reckoning." The journey to Northumberland took 3 days. Sebastian spent them in silence, the rhythmic clopping of the horses' hooves serving as a metronome for his brooding. He did not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Genevieve's face, that perfect porcelain mask, and heard her calling him a savage. He had left a letter for her in London, delivered by a courier. It was brief, apologetic, and calculated. It claimed urgent business at the coal mines on his northern estate. He wrote that he would be gone for a month, perhaps 2. He signed it, "Yours devotedly, Sebastian." He needed her to believe nothing had changed. He needed her to feel secure. A trap only works if the prey does not see the cage. Blackwood Hall, his ancestral seat in the north, was a stark difference from the polished townhouses of London. It was a massive, brooding structure of grey stone, perched on a cliff overlooking a churning, steel-grey sea. The wind here howled, and the trees grew twisted and gnarled. It was a place of power and isolation. As the carriage pulled into the courtyard, the staff lined up to greet him. They looked nervous. They had not expected the Duke for months. The housekeeper, Mrs. Halloway, stepped forward. She was a stern woman who had known Sebastian since he was a boy. "Your Grace, we were not prepared," she said, bobbing a curtsy. "It does not matter," Sebastian said, stepping down. The wind whipped his coat around his legs. "I require solitude, no guests, no callers, and I want a full audit of the estate accounts brought to my study by morning." "Of course. And regarding the library, Your Grace." Sebastian paused. "What about the library?" "We have hired a temporary cataloguer, as per your previous instructions from last year. A Miss Esme Thorne. She has been working there for 3 weeks. Shall I dismiss her?" Sebastian had forgotten. He had ordered the massive, chaotic library of Blackwood Hall to be organized a year ago. "No," he said dismissively, "as long as she stays out of my way. I want to see no one." He stormed into the house, the heavy doors booming shut behind him. For the first week, Sebastian drank. He sat in his study, staring at the fire, nursing a glass of amber brandy, letting the betrayal ferment inside him. He replayed the conversation in the Sterling drawing room 1,000 times. He analyzed every interaction he'd ever had with Genevieve. Was that smile fake? Was that touch calculated? He realized with sickening clarity that she had never asked him a single question about his thoughts, his dreams, or his past. She had only ever agreed with him. She had been a mirror, reflecting what he wanted to see. On the 8th day, the alcohol ran out, and the headache set in. Sebastian needed air. He wandered through the vast, draughty corridors of the hall, ending up in the east wing, where the great library was housed. He pushed the doors open, expecting dust and silence. Instead, he found chaos. Books were stacked in towers on every available surface. Ladders leaned precariously against the towering shelves. and in the center of the room, on a large oak table, sat a woman surrounded by piles of parchment. She did not look like Genevieve. She had hair the color of roasted chestnuts, pulled back in a severe bun that was currently losing the battle against gravity, with stray curls escaping around her face. She wore a plain grey dress, stained with ink at the cuffs. She was chewing on the end of a pencil, frowning at a ledger. She didn't hear him enter. "I thought I gave orders not to be disturbed," Sebastian growled. The woman jumped, dropping her pencil. She spun around, her eyes wide. They were hazel, flecked with green, and currently filled with shock. "Your Grace!" She scrambled to stand, knocking over a small stack of books in the process. I didn't know you were in the wing. Mrs. Halloway said you were in the study." "I go where I please in my own house," Sebastian snapped. He was in a foul mood, and this intruder was an easy target. "Who are you?" Esme Thorn," she stammered, dipping a clumsy curtsy. "The cataloguer." "You are making a mess, Miss Thorn." She straightened up, and to his surprise, the fear in her eyes was replaced by a spark of annoyance. "I am making order, Your Grace," she corrected him, her voice steadying. "To create order, one must first create a mess. This library hasn't been properly sorted since 1750. I found a first edition of Dante used as a coaster for a plant pot." Sebastian blinked. Few people dared to correct him, certainly not staff. "And I suppose you are the savior of my books?" he sneered, walking closer. He wanted to intimidate her. He wanted to feel powerful, because Genevieve had made him feel so small. Esme held her ground, though she gripped the edge of the table. "Books do not need saving, Your Grace. They need reading and respecting. Something that has been lacking here." Sebastian stopped a few feet from her. He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't a society beauty. She had ink on her nose. Her hands were rough, likely from paper cuts and handling heavy tomes. She looked real. "And what would you know of respect?" he asked quietly, the venom from his own heartbreak seeping into his tone. "I know that judging a book by its cover is a fool's errand," she said softly, holding his gaze. "And I know that neglecting something valuable just because it is old or difficult to understand is a tragedy." The words hung in the air. Neglecting something valuable. Sebastian felt the anger drain out of him, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming exhaustion. He looked at the piles of books, history, philosophy, poetry, all the things he used to love before he became obsessed with fitting into a world that despised him. "Get out," he said, but the bite was gone from his voice. "Your Grace, leave me for today. You may return tomorrow." Esme hesitated, then nodded. She gathered her papers. As she walked past him, she paused. "There is a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius on the side table," she said quietly. "I noticed the spine was broken, as if it had been read many times. I repaired it." She didn't wait for a thank you. She slipped out the door, leaving him alone with the silence and the dust. Sebastian walked to the side table. There it was. His father's old copy. He hadn't seen it in years. He picked it up. The leather was supple, freshly oiled. The loose pages had been carefully glued back into place. It had been handled with care, with tenderness. For the first time since the night in London, the knot in his chest loosened just a fraction. He sat down in the leather armchair and opened the book. He didn't read, though. He began to plot. Genevieve wanted a beast. He would give her one. But to do that, he needed to lure her here, to his turf, to the wild, unforgiving north, where her society manners would mean nothing. He reached for a pen and a fresh sheet of paper. "My dearest Genevieve," he wrote, The solitude of the north has made me realize how much I rely on your strength. I find myself unwell. The doctors are concerned. I fear I cannot return to London yet. Please, my love, come to Blackwood Hall. I need you. And bring the wedding contracts. We must settle our future before my condition worsens. He signed it with a flourish. It was a lie, a magnificent, terrible lie. He was telling her exactly what she wanted to hear, that he was weak, that he was dying, and that the money was ready for the taking. She would come. She would come running like a vulture to a carcass. And when she arrived, she would find that the carcass had teeth. Genevieve arrived 10 days later, her carriage accompanied by a second vehicle laden with trunks. She did not come alone. She brought her mother, Lady Stirling, a woman whose smile was as sharp as a splintered glass, and who had taught Genevieve everything she knew about the art of social climbing. Sebastian watched their arrival from the high window of the West Tower. He leaned heavily on a cane he did not need, practicing the stoop of a broken man. He had ordered the fires in the main hall to be kept low, ensuring the house felt damp and unwelcoming. If they wanted his money, they would have to freeze for it. "Remember," Sebastian muttered to himself, checking his reflection in the darkened glass. "You are dying. You are weak. You are the beast they pity." He descended the stairs slowly, letting his footsteps drag. When the doors opened, a gust of freezing wind blew Genevieve and her mother inside. Genevieve was wrapped in layers of expensive fur, but her face was pinched with annoyance. "Good heavens!" Lady Stirling screeched, clutching her bonnet. "It is a tomb. Does the Duke not have coal?" "Genevieve," Sebastian rasped, stepping out of the shadows. He let his hand tremble as he reached for the banister. Genevieve's expression shifted instantly. The annoyance vanished, replaced by a mask of tragic concern. It was a performance worthy of the Drury Lane stage. "Oh, Sebastian!" She rushed forward, her perfume, heavy rosewater, overpowering the scent of the old stone. She took his hands, her gloves soft against his skin. "My poor dear love, your letter, it terrified me." She scanned his face. Sebastian had stopped shaving 3 days ago, and he had instructed his valet to apply a dusting of white powder to his complexion to make him look ashen. He saw the flash of triumph in her eyes. She didn't see a lover in pain. She saw a shortened timeline to widowhood. "I am grateful you came," Sebastian said, keeping his voice low and breathless. "The doctors, they say it is the blood. A weakness of the heart." "A weakness of the heart?" Lady Stirling echoed, stepping forward and eyeing the grand tapestries on the wall with an appraiser's glint. "How tragic. But you are in good hands now, Your Grace. My Genevieve is a born nurse." "I only wish to be by your side," Genevieve cooed, leading him toward the drawing-room. "But tell me, Sebastian, have you spoken to the solicitors? Your letter mentioned settling affairs." Barely through the door and already asking for the cheque, Sebastian thought bitterly. "Rest, my love," he said aloud. "We can speak of dry legal matters later. First you must settle in. But I must warn you, the hall is not like London. It is old. It makes noises. And the staff, they are loyal to me, but they are simple folk." "We shall manage," Genevieve said, patting his arm condescendingly. "I will take charge of the household. You clearly need a woman's touch here. This place is positively dreary." The dinner that evening was a masterclass in discomfort. Sebastian had ordered the cook to prepare a traditional northern meal, heavy stew, black pudding, and bitter ale. No French wine, no delicate pastries. Genevieve pushed the food around her plate with disdain. "Is this edible?" she whispered to her mother. "Eat, Jenny," Lady Stirling hissed back. Strength for the task ahead. Sebastian sat at the head of the table, slumped in his chair. I apologize, he murmured. My appetite has left me. I live mostly on broth these days. So sad, Genevieve said, taking a sip of water and grimacing at the taste. Sebastian, about the wedding date. Mother and I were thinking, given your fragility, perhaps we should expedite the ceremony. A quiet affair here in the chapel? Next week? Sebastian looked at her. She was beautiful in the candlelight, her golden hair gleaming. But now he could see the rot beneath the surface. She wanted to marry him before he died, to secure the title and the entirety of the estate without contest. Next week? Sebastian coughed, a harsh, rattling sound he had practiced in the cellar. It is so soon. I wanted to give you a grand London wedding. Oh, I don't care for pomp, she lied smoothly. I only care for us. I want to be your wife, Sebastian. While we have time. Very well, Sebastian whispered, closing his eyes as if the effort of speaking drained him. I will send for my solicitor, Mr. Pendergast. He will draw up the papers. But Genevieve, there is something you must know. The room went silent. Genevieve leaned in, her eyes hungry. Yes? The Blackwood curse, Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a whisper. They say the men of my line do not die peacefully. They say the house takes them. Genevieve laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. You are feverish, darling. There is no such thing as curses. Is there not? Sebastian opened his eyes, staring intensely at her. Then why do I hear footsteps in the corridor at night? Why do objects move on their own? The hall does not like strangers, Genevieve. Be careful. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. I must rest. Thomas will show you to your rooms. He left them there, stunned and slightly unsettled. As he walked away, he signalled to Mrs. Halloway in the shadows. The housekeeper nodded imperceptibly. The haunting of Genevieve Stirling was about to begin. 3 days into her stay, Genevieve was miserable. The heating in her room mysteriously malfunctioned. Her favourite silk dresses were found snagged on invisible nails, and every night, strange scratching sounds emanated from the walls, courtesy of the stable boy, whom Sebastian had paid handsomely to run a stick along the wainscoting of the guest wing. While Genevieve fought her war against the draughty house, Sebastian found sanctuary in the library. He had told Genevieve he was resting in his chambers, forbidding her from disturbing him. In reality, he slipped through a servant's passage to the east wing, where the fire was roaring and the air smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Esme Thorne was there, as always. In the few days since their first meeting, the dynamic between the Duke and the cataloguer had shifted. She no longer jumped when he entered. She simply looked up, offered a nod that was respectful but not subservient, and continued her work. You look better today, Your Grace, Esme said, not looking up from a stack of maps she was restoring. Less murderous. Sebastian chuckled, pouring himself a cup of tea from the tray she had set out. I am playing a role, Miss Thorne. It is exhausting work. And what role is that? The tragical romance hero? Or the villain? Both, I think. Sebastian sat in the armchair opposite her. He found he could breathe around Esme. She knew nothing of his wealth's extent, only that he had a lot of books. She judged him on his intellect, on his interpretations of the texts they discussed. I found something that might interest you, Esme said, sliding a thin, leather-bound book across the table. It's a journal. From your great-grandfather, the one who built the West Wing. Sebastian picked it up. I thought he was a madman. That's the family legend. He wasn't mad, Esme said softly. He was grieving. I read the entries. He lost his wife in childbirth. He built the wing so he could look out at the sea, towards her homeland in France. It wasn't madness. It was devotion. Sebastian ran his thumb over the cover. Devotion. A word Genevieve used constantly, but Esme actually understood. "You have a gift, Miss Thorne," Sebastian said quietly. "You see the truth in things that others have discarded." Esme looked at him then, her hazel eyes searching his face. "People leave traces of themselves in what they write and what they read, Your Grace. If you look close enough, no one is truly hidden." "And what do you see when you look at me?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. It was dangerous. He shouldn't ask. Esme paused, her pen hovering over the paper. She chewed her lip, a habit he found inexplicably endearing. "I see a man who is carrying a very heavy shield," she said honestly, "and I think he is tired of holding it up, but he is terrified of what will happen if he puts it down." Sebastian stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. For a moment, he wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to tell her about the curtain, about the lie, about the woman currently shivering in the guest room who planned to kill him for his money. But he couldn't. Not yet. "You are perceptive," he said, his voice gruff. "It is a dangerous quality." "Perhaps," she smiled slightly. "But it helps with the filing." Their moment was shattered by the sound of high heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor outside the library. "Sebastian, are you in there? The maid said she saw you come this way." Genevieve's voice was shrill. Sebastian's face hardened. The mask slammed back into place. "Hide," he hissed to Esme. "What? Behind the stacks. Please, I cannot explain." Esme didn't argue. She grabbed her ledger and slipped behind a towering shelf of encyclopedias just as the doors burst open. Genevieve stormed in, looking flushed and angry. She was wearing a morning gown that cost more than Esme would earn in a lifetime, but she wore it like armor. "There you are," she cried. "I have been looking everywhere. You said you were too ill to leave your bed." "I felt a moment of strength," Sebastian lied, leaning heavily on the table. "I sought solace in the books. My ancestors. They give me comfort." Genevieve looked around the room with a sneer. "Dust collectors. You should burn half of these. The smell is atrocious. It smells like poverty." From behind the stack, Sebastian saw Esme's shadow stiffen. "These books are history, Genevieve," Sebastian said, his tone sharpening. "They are kindling," she dismissed. "But that is not why I am here. Rupert, a courier, brought a letter from London. My creditors, some creditors, are being difficult about the wedding costs. I need you to sign a draft for £5,000. Immediately." "5,000? Sebastian widened his eyes. "Genevieve, that is a fortune." "It is necessary," she snapped, losing her composure. "Do you want me to walk down the aisle in rags? Do you want to shame me?" She moved closer, putting a hand on his chest. "Please, Sebastian, if you love me, you have so much, and you can't take it with you, where you're going." The slip was subtle, but it was there. "Where you're going. To the grave." Sebastian looked at her hand. He felt nothing but revulsion. "I will speak to Pendergast," he said coldly. "If the expense is justified, he will pay it." "I don't want Pendergast," she shouted. "I want you to sign it. Why are you being so difficult? You're supposed to be—" She stopped. Supposed to be a pushover. Supposed to be grateful. "Supposed to be what, my love?" Sebastian asked softly. "Generous," she recovered, flashing a watery fake smile. "You are the Duke of Blackwood. Be a duke." "I am trying, Genevieve. I am trying." She huffed, turning on her heel. Fine, but have Pendergast ready by tomorrow. I won't wait forever. She marched out. Sebastian exhaled, his shoulders slumping. You can come out now, Miss Thorne. Esme emerged from the stacks. Her face was pale, her eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and anger. She is horrible, Esme whispered. She speaks to you as if you are a bank vault, not a man. She thinks I am dying, Sebastian said simply. She is impatient for the inheritance. And are you? Esme asked, her voice trembling. Dying? Sebastian looked at this woman, this stranger who had repaired his father's book and defended his grandfather's memory. He decided to trust her. No, Sebastian said firmly, standing up straight and tossing the cane onto the table with a clatter. I am as healthy as a horse. It is a trap, Miss Thorne, and she has walked right into it. Esme stared at him, processing the shift from invalid to powerhouse. A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't a polite smile, it was a conspiratorial one. Then, Your Grace, she said, picking up a heavy volume of contract law from her pile. I suggest we find a way to spring it. The alliance was formed. Over the next 2 days, Esme became Sebastian's eyes and ears. While he played the bedridden invalid, Esme moved through the house. As a lowly employee, she was invisible to Genevieve and Lady Sterling. She heard them discussing which paintings to sell first. She heard them laughing about how they would turn the library into a ballroom. She heard them mention Rupert Calloway, who was apparently staying at an inn in the nearby village, waiting for the signal that the deed was done. On the 3rd evening, Sebastian decided it was time to tighten the noose. He announced a formal dinner. He claimed he was feeling a surge of vitality, a common precursor to death, as he grimly noted to Genevieve, and wanted to celebrate their upcoming nuptials. He insisted that Mr. Pendergast, the family solicitor, be present. The dining room was lit by 100 candles. The table was set with the finest silver. Sebastian sat at the head, dressed in formal evening wear, though he kept his face powdered pale. Genevieve sat to his right, dripping in diamonds he had given her. Mr. Pendergast, a dry, withered man who had served the Blackwood estate for 40 years and knew exactly what Sebastian was doing, sat across from them. The wedding contracts are prepared, Your Grace, Pendergast said, placing a heavy sheaf of papers on the table. Genevieve's eyes locked onto the papers like a hawk spotting a field mouse. Excellent, she purred. Shall we sign now, before the soup gets cold? Patience, my love, Sebastian said. There is a matter of the stipulations. Stipulations? Lady Sterling perked up, her fork halfway to her mouth. What stipulations? Well, Sebastian began, his voice weak. Since I have no heir, and my health is precarious, I have had to make certain arrangements to protect the estate. The Blackwood title cannot pass to a woman, as you know. It will go to my cousin in Cornwall. Genevieve's face fell. Your cousin? But what of the money? The houses? The unentailed fortune, Sebastian continued, is mine to bequeath. Exactly, Genevieve breathed. However, Pendergast interrupted, adjusting his spectacles. His Grace has inserted a fidelity clause into the marriage contract. It is quite standard for estates of this magnitude. Fidelity clause? Genevieve asked, her voice rising an octave. Yes, Sebastian said. It states that should I pass away within 5 years of the marriage, the widow shall receive a generous allowance of £200 a year. 200! Genevieve shrieked, standing up. That is a pittance. That wouldn't pay for my gloves. It is a livable wage, Sebastian said calmly. However, the bulk of the fortune, the millions, will be held in a trust. The widow only accesses the full fortune If she can prove, he paused, coughing into a handkerchief. If she can prove that she was faithful in thought and deed, and that she enters the marriage with no outstanding debts or prior romantic entanglements that could scandalize the family name. Genevieve went pale. Rupert's gambling debts were massive. Her own debts were substantial, and her affair with Rupert was the worst kept secret in London, even if she thought she was discreet. "This is insulting," Lady Stirling barked. "My daughter is a lady of virtue. How dare you question her honour?" "If she is virtuous, she has nothing to fear," Sebastian said, watching Genevieve closely. "The clause also stipulates that if the widow is found to have conspired against the Duke or maintained a lover, the marriage is annulled retroactively and she receives nothing, not a penny. In fact, she would be liable for the cost of the wedding." Genevieve sank back into her chair. Her mind was clearly racing. She couldn't sign that. If she signed that, and Rupert was discovered, she would be destitute. But if she didn't sign it, she couldn't marry him. I need time to review this," Genevieve stammered. "It is complex legalese." "Of course," Sebastian smiled, a predatory glint finally breaking through his invalid act. "Take tonight. But remember, my love, my heart is weak. Who knows if I shall wake tomorrow to sign anything at all." He was baiting her. He was practically begging her to do something rash. Later that night, the trap was sprung. Sebastian was in the library with Esme. They were waiting. "Do you think she will do it?" Esme asked. She was wringing her hands. "It is dangerous, Sebastian. If she is desperate—" "She is desperate," Sebastian said, standing by the window. He had washed the powder off his face. He looked strong, formidable. "And desperate people make mistakes." Just then, a shadow moved across the garden below. "There," Sebastian pointed. A figure in a cloak was hurrying from the side door towards the stables. It was Genevieve. "Where is she going?" Esme asked. "She is not going anywhere," Sebastian said grimly. "She is meeting someone. I suspect Lord Rupert has tired of the village inn." Sebastian turned to Esme. "Stay here. Lock the door." "No," Esme said, grabbing his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I am coming with you. You need a witness, don't you? A witness who isn't family or solicitor. An impartial observer." Sebastian looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, but also the steel. She was right. "Stay close behind me," he commanded. They moved quietly out into the night. The rain had started again, a cold drizzle that soaked them instantly. They followed the path toward the old carriage house, a dilapidated structure near the cliffs. Inside, a lantern flickered. Sebastian and Esme crept up to the rotting wooden slats. Through the gaps, they could see them. Genevieve was pacing back and forth. Rupert was sitting on a bale of hay, looking wet and miserable. "He knows something, Rupert," Genevieve was hissing. "The contract. It's a trap. If I sign it and he finds out about us, I get nothing. Nothing." "So don't sign it," Rupert shrugged. "Let him die. Does the will cover you?" "He hasn't signed the new will yet," she screamed. "That old bat Pendergast is dragging his feet. If Sebastian dies tonight, the money goes to his cousin. I have to marry him to get the dower rights, but I can't marry him with that clause." "Then we have a problem, Jenny." "I have a solution," she said, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "He takes medicine, a tonic for his heart. It sits by his bedside. If he were to take too much, or if the tonic were to be replaced with something stronger." "Murder, Jenny," Rupert whistled. "That's a hanging offense. Only if we get caught. He's already dying. Who would question it if he simply stopped breathing in his sleep? Then I am the grieving fiancé. I can sue the estate for a settlement. or claim we were secretly married in Scotland. I just need him dead before the lawyers lock everything down." Esme gasped. It was a tiny sound, but in the quiet of the stable it was a thunderclap. Rupert's head snapped up. "What was that?" "Someone is outside," Genevieve hissed. "Check it." Sebastian stepped away from the wall, pushing Esme behind him. He drew himself up to his full height. He didn't have a weapon, but he didn't need one. He had the truth, and he had the rage of a storm. He kicked the stable door open. It banged against the wall with a crash that shook dust from the rafters. "Good evening, Rupert," Sebastian said, his voice booming, deep and rich and entirely devoid of illness. "I believe you are trespassing," Genevieve screamed. She spun around, her face draining of all color. She looked from Sebastian, standing tall, powerful, and very much alive, to Rupert, and back again. "Sebastian?" she whispered. "But you are sick." "I am cured," Sebastian said, stepping into the light. "Miraculously. It seems the only poison in my system was you." The silence in the stable was heavier than the oak beams overhead. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the loose slates of the roof. But inside, the only sound was the ragged breathing of 4 people standing on the precipice of ruin. Rupert Calloway was the first to move. He was a desperate man, a gambler who owed money to dangerous people in London. He saw his salvation in Genevieve's marriage, and now he saw that salvation standing tall, broad-shouldered, and furious. "You were listening?" Rupert snarled, his hand dropping to his boot. "You overheard us." "I have been listening for a long time, Rupert," Sebastian said, his voice calm but vibrating with a dangerous undercurrent. "I listened in London, behind a velvet curtain, when you called me a beast. And I listened tonight, while you plotted to murder me in my sleep." Genevieve let out a strangled sob. "Sebastian, please! It was him! He forced me! He threatened me!" Rupert turned on her, his eyes wide with betrayal. "You lying witch! It was your idea. The poison, you said. Make it look like a heart attack, you said." "Silence!" Sebastian's voice cracked like a whip. The command was so absolute that both of them flinched. Sebastian took a step forward, the lantern light casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. "You speak of me as if I am a fool, as if a man who manages the largest coal output in Northumberland cannot spot a snake in his own garden." He looked at Genevieve, the woman he had once thought was his future. In the harsh light, stripped of her society airs, she looked small, mean, common. "I offered you the world, Genevieve," Sebastian said softly. "I would have given you everything. My name, my protection, my heart. All I asked for was honesty. Instead, you looked at me and saw a bank draft with a pulse." I can change," Genevieve stammered, falling to her knees in the straw, ruining her silk dress. "I was scared, Sebastian. We were in debt. Please forgive me. I will sign the contract. I will sign the fidelity clause. I will be the best wife." "Enough," Sebastian said, disgust curling his lip. "Do not insult me further with your lies." Rupert, seeing that begging was futile, decided on violence. With a primal yell, he lunged. He pulled a small pistol from his coat, a cowardly weapon for a cowardly man. "No!" Esme screamed, throwing herself forward. But Sebastian was faster. He had anticipated this. He didn't back away. He stepped into the attack. As Rupert raised the gun, Sebastian's hand shot out, gripping Rupert's wrist with bone-crushing force. There was a sickening crack. Rupert screamed, dropping the gun. Sebastian didn't stop. He grabbed Rupert by the lapels of his expensive, unpaid-for coat and slammed him against the wooden stall. The impact shook dust from the rafters. "You called me a savage," Sebastian whispered into Rupert's terrified face. You called me a brute. Shall I show you what a brute does to men who threaten his household?" Sebastian pulled back a fist, massive and hard as iron. Rupert squeezed his eyes shut, whimpering, but the blow never came. "Sebastian?" It was Esme's voice, clear, steady, anchoring. Sebastian froze. His fist hovered inches from Rupert's nose. He was breathing hard, the rage of a lifetime of rejection boiling in his blood. He wanted to hurt them. He wanted to break them. "Sebastian," Esme said again, stepping up beside him and placing a gentle hand on his tense bicep. "Look at them. They are not worth the bruising of your knuckles." Sebastian looked at Esme. Her hazel eyes were filled with fear. Yes, but also with an immense amount of trust. She wasn't asking him to stop because she was afraid of him. She was asking him to stop because she knew he was better than this. Slowly the tension left his frame. He released Rupert, who slid down the wall, clutching his broken wrist, sobbing like a child. Sebastian straightened his cuffs. He looked every inch the Duke. "You are right, Miss Thorne," Sebastian said coolly. "Violence is the language of the weak, and I am not weak." He turned to the stable doors. "Thomas! Mr. Pendergast!" The doors swung fully open. Thomas, the coachman, stood there with 3 burly stable hands, holding pitchforks. Behind them stood Mr. Pendergast, looking grim, holding a notepad. "Did you get all that, Pendergast?" Sebastian asked. "Every word, Your Grace," the solicitor said, stepping over the threshold. "Conspiracy to commit murder. Fraud. Attempted assault with a deadly weapon. I believe the local magistrate, Sir William Darby, will be very interested in this night's events." "No police!" Lady Stirling's voice shrieked from the doorway. She had followed Genevieve out, sensing disaster. She stood there, clutching her shawl, looking at her daughter on the ground and Rupert in a heap. "Think of the scandal, Your Grace. It will ruin us. It will ruin you." "It will not ruin me," Sebastian said coldly, "because I am the victim. But you are finished." He pointed a finger at the open door, where the rain was pouring down in sheets. "Get out." Genevieve looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. "What?" "Leave my property," Sebastian commanded. "Take your mother, take your lover, and go." "But the carriage," Genevieve gasped. "It is pouring. It is 5 miles to the village." "Then you had better start walking," Sebastian said, his voice devoid of mercy. "My carriages are for guests. You are trespassers." "You can't be serious," Rupert moaned, cradling his arm. "Thomas," Sebastian nodded to his coachman, "escort them to the gate. If they are not off Blackwood land in 10 minutes, set the hounds loose." "With pleasure, Your Grace," Thomas growled. Genevieve scrambled to her feet. She looked at Sebastian one last time, hoping for a reprieve, a flicker of the love he used to hold. She found only a wall of stone. She turned and ran into the rain, her mother wailing behind her. Rupert stumbled after them, clutching his arm. Sebastian stood in the doorway of the stable, watching them disappear into the dark, wet night. The storm raged around them, washing away the lies, leaving the truth bare. He felt a hand slip into his. He looked down. Esme was standing beside him, shivering slightly in the cold air. He immediately took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "It is over," she whispered. "No," Sebastian said, pulling her closer, shielding her from the wind. "It is just beginning." London society devoured the scandal like starving wolves. The police report filed by Mr. Pendergast left no room for doubt, and the headlines were merciless. "The Duchess Who Never Was, a plot of poison and greed." Genevieve Stirling, once the jewel of the season, was now a social pariah. Her debts quickly consumed the remainder of her family's estate. Stripped of her finery and abandoned by her fair-weather friends, she was forced into the very life she had once mocked. The last anyone heard, she was working as a governess for a strict merchant family in Bristol, scrubbing ink stains from children's fingers. Rupert Calloway fared worse, trading his silk waistcoats for the rough, grey uniform of Marshalsea Prison, where he would have a decade to contemplate his gambling debts. But at Blackwood Hall, the gloom had lifted with the winter mist. Spring transformed the rugged northern cliffs, bringing wildflowers and warmth, mirroring the change in the Duke himself. Sebastian no longer skulked in shadows or feigned illness. He walked with the stride of a man unburdened. He found Esme in the rose garden, reading the repaired copy of Meditations. She looked up as he approached, her smile genuine and devoid of artifice. "Your work is finished, Miss Thorne," Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion. "The library is perfect. You are free to go." Esme closed the book, a shadow crossing her face. "I see. Then I shall pack my things." "You could," Sebastian interrupted, stepping closer. "Or you could accept a permanent position." He knelt on the gravel, ignoring the dirt on his breeches. He didn't produce the heavy, cursed Blackwood sapphire. Instead, he revealed a simple gold band set with a vibrant emerald, the color of new beginnings. "I do not need a librarian, Esme. I need a partner. I need the woman who saw the man behind the beast and possessed the courage to save him. I cannot promise you a life without whispers, for society never forgives a duke who marries for love rather than lineage. But I promise you a life of truth." Esme stared at him, tears pricking her hazel eyes. There was no calculation in her gaze, only radiant joy. She slipped off the bench to kneel beside him, bridging the gap between their worlds. "I don't care about society, Sebastian," she whispered, placing her hands on his face. "I only care about the story we write together." "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she breathed, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of fresh air and freedom. "1,000 times, yes." As they embraced under the northern sun, the ghosts of Blackwood finally fell silent, replaced by the steady beating of two hearts that had finally found their home. And that is the story of how the Duke of Blackwood found out that sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the greatest love. Genevieve wanted a fortune, but she ended up with nothing but rain and regret. Sebastian wanted a wife, but he found a soulmate who loved the man, not the money. It just goes to show, always be careful what you say when you think no one is listening, because the truth has a funny way of coming out from behind the curtain. If you enjoyed this story of heartbreak, revenge, and true love, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, where the good guys win and the bad guys get exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. What did you think of Genevieve's punishment? Did she get off too easy? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.